Hi and welcome once again to your Backstage Pass for the 28th annual Boscov's Berks Jazz Fest. It's getting ever closer, and I probably shouldn't say this because you might be watching this at any point. But the Jazz Fest is every spring here in Reading, Pennsylvania, made possible by the Berks Arts Council. We thank them for that, and they also make this Backstage Pass series possible. And it's where we have an opportunity to kind of sit backstage, if you will, with different artists, with promoters, with volunteers, around the Jazz Fest and get some of that story that we don't typically get as an audience member. And I want to welcome and thank you, Peter White, for joining us.
It's great to be here.
I appreciate that. You know, last time, and welcome to our Adobe, because last time you and I talked, we were at the Miller Center, and It was between your Christmas show, which, by the way, I have to bring that up. Do you know it's become tradition for many, many people here that their holiday doesn't start till they get to that Christmas show that you've been doing how many years now?
14
Is it?
years.
Yeah.
Actually, I missed the last Christmas season. Missed because I was on tour with Dave Cars and doing his Christmas show, and we didn't make it to Reading.
It didn't work
but
out.
we will be back this December for sure.
Is there something, you know, when you do a Christmas show, and I wonder that even when I watch it, because it's those traditional songs we always, you know, these are what we want to hear, yet when you go year after year, you make it different. Is that challenging to do a holiday kind of standard show?
It's a lot of fun. These are great songs.
Yeah.
By the way.
Yeah.
Every song is tried and tested, and by time. And we. We're all artists. I'm doing it this year with Rick Braun and Huge Groove, and it's very easy, I think, for us to play the Christmas music in the way that suits our style, because that's what we do. Yeah. And if a song doesn't suit our style, we'll just kind of leave it by the wayside. But pretty much any Christmas song, we'll find a way to do it that's a little bit different. If it's a slow song, we'll make it upbeat. If it's an upbeat song, we might make it slow. Yeah. Just to make it different.
Make it your touch.
And it's fun.
You mentioned Huge Groove. You're playing with him this year. And
yes.
Keiko Matsui, right?
Yes, at the Jazz Festival, the Berks Jazz Festival, we will be playing together. Keiko, wonderful lyricism of her playing.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Melodic, dynamic, Japanese lady, just brilliant musician. And on the other end of the spectrum, a Huge Groove, American roots, very funky music, and I'm kind of in the middle. That's how I see my role in that show.
So who sets the stage? When you have those three diverse backgrounds and roots, if you will, who sets the stage in blending that, making it work?
We all do. We listen to each other's songs. Sometimes we make suggestions as to songs that the other artists can play that will fit, all of us. But there's always a place for us to fit. There's usually some guitar in Keiko's music, for instance, and in Yuji's music, and there's usually some saxophone in Keiko's music. So we're drawn out of our comfort zone a little bit because we're not playing our music, but we're playing someone else's music. But that's good for us.
Do you like that?
Yeah, I do. And I think it's one of the great things about what we do is that we're very often put in these situations where we're collaborating with other artists who come from wildly different backgrounds. I grew up in England. Keiko grew up in Japan. Yeah. Huge grew up in Maryland. So
it's pretty diverse just in terms of culture.
Yeah, and we all listen to different music. Like I'll say to Keiko, "Oh, you remember this song?" And she goes, "No."
Oh, wow.
Growing up in Japan, no, she didn't hear that song. And Yuji will say to me, "Well, don't you know this song?" And I go, "Well, no, I wasn't living in America in the 60s. So a lot of the songs went to England, but a lot of them didn't.
Right.
Like, for instance, he plays Shotgun by Junior Walker. And if I wasn't a musician and I wasn't playing alongside with him, I don't think I would even know that song because it was never a hit in England.
What was your influence in England growing up? What was happening in the musical world that made you say, I want to go play this guitar?
That's a very easy question to answer, and maybe you can guess. It was the early 60s.
Beatles.
The Beatles.
They touched us too.
I remember walking out into the playground and I heard some kids going, yeah, 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 yeah. And I said, what is this? Yeah, yeah, yeah. What is that? And they were singing the Beatles song.
That's how you were first introduced to them?
I didn't know because I wasn't listening to the radio before then. And it was after that I started listening to the radio. And I started to hear the Beatles. And the sound of the guitar just captivated me. Like a day tripper. Down, 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 down. I thought, this is the greatest.
Okay.
This is the greatest sound I've ever heard. You know, that got me interested in playing the guitar, quite honestly, around the age of 7 or 8.
So prior to that, you weren't playing any musical instruments?
I think I was playing the piano before that, and my father also got me playing the recorder.
Oh, right.
You know,
It looks like a flute.
Yeah, it's like a flute, yeah. And that was probably my first instrument. And he taught us, me and my brother and sister, to play Christmas music.
Oh,
so
yeah,
the first music I ever played was Christmas music, all the way back then in the early 60s.
So you were first influenced by your dad. He was a musician?
He played the piano.
Professionally?
He wasn't a professional, no, but he liked to play, and he encouraged me to play the piano, and he got me my first guitar, even though he never encouraged me to play the guitar. The guitar was there. Down. I started just, plucking one string. I never had a lesson. To this day, I've never had a lesson on guitar.
You're kidding me.
No, I just picked it up by listening to the radio, hearing those guitar riffs like on the Beatles records, and just trying to imitate.
Did you learn the piano the same way, by ear?
I learnt the piano. I had piano lessons, but my favorite time playing the piano was when I put the music away and I just started banging out chords by myself, and also trying to imitate what I heard on the radio. So I've always learnt by ear. And people say, well, do you read music? I do read music. And my dad taught me to read music, but I relate the music to the piano because that's how I learn. Okay. I don't relate music to the guitar because I never made that connection.
Well, how did you get connected to the smooth jazz world? Your influences are rock and roll.
I joined a band when I was 20 years old. I started playing with Al Stewart, who was known as a folk singer in England. But he put a band together and he wanted to make it big in America. And he did, because he recorded an album called The Year of the Cat in 1976, which I was involved in. I played on that record, and that was the first time that I played the nylon string guitar, because that's the sound he wanted to hear. And there was a song on that album called On the Border, which features me playing the nylon string guitar. And it was the first time I'd ever been in a recording studio, which was Abbey Road, by the way.
Wow. I
was thrilled to be in the home of the Beatles, considering how many years I had been following them. But that song became a big part of his show, and I played with him for 20 years. I
want to go get that album now. Yeah. You're going to go get
A Year
of the Cat and listen.
If you find the original, what they call the gatefold, remember, it opens up, LP, there's a picture of me in there when I was just turning 21.
So that was your introduction not only to the nylon guitar, but to America.
Yeah, we came to America. We were touring. Actually, Philadelphia is where we landed. My very first trip, and Academy of Music in Philadelphia was my very first gig in America. So that's how I got introduced to nylon string guitar.
That's a pretty good gig for your first gig in America.
And when I came to do my first solo album, and quite honestly, I heard Acoustic Alchemy on the radio, who were another English band, and I thought, wow, I love what these guys are doing. I want to do something like this. That's what got me thinking that I could make my own album, and maybe I would get played on the radio.
So you started writing music at that point?
I had already been writing music with Al Stewart. The song Time Passages I wrote with him, which was a top 10 hit in 1978.
I remember it well.
Yeah. So, but it was 10 years after that I started actually thinking that I could have a solo career.
And you've done very well in this solo career.
I'm still here.
Yes, yes.
After is it almost 28 years.
Who's counting when you're having that much fun, right? But you've
Yeah.
made a career out of this, and you've played with numerous musicians along the way. Is there a lot of rehearsal that goes on prior to that when you meet a new musician, or you just kind of show up and maybe?
Sometimes there is. We did collaboration tours in the 95. I think we did the first Guitars and Saxes tour, which was a collaboration of me, Richard Elliott, Craig Chiquiso, and Warren Hill. And we did get together and rehearse for a few days for that.
For a few days.
And I thought this was the worst idea ever. I thought all the egos coming together in one room, we're all going to be arguing, no one's going to agree on anything, and yet it was the best thing that ever happened because it got me out of being a sideman and on the road playing my music.
You were listening?
Even though my first album had been recorded, 4 years before.
Listening to your the picture you're painting with all of these different musicians from all parts of the world, and you're thinking this is going to be a catastrophe, who's going to dominate? And it reminds me of the saying that our music is the universal language.
Yeah.
So no matter where you're from, everybody's speaking that language.
Yes.
Do you sense that when you're in the studio with somebody you've never met before? You're talking the same.
Absolutely. And someone can say, this song goes like this, and this is what I want you to play here, and it's a kind of this, kind of, and I'm going, just let me listen to it.
Yeah.
And I'll play what I feel, and really, then we'll go from there. And it usually works because that's how I learnt, by listening. Mm-hmm. And if anyone explains something to me, it doesn't usually help because the music that I'm hearing explains everything to me that I need to know.
It's how you feel it more than it can be explained.
Yes.
We have 5 questions we ask everybody.
5 questions.
Yes, in this Backstage Pass. And
Number 1.
Are you ready? Jazz music. We've talked a little bit about how you got into it. What does jazz music mean to you when you hear that?
I first started listening to jazz music, actually, when I was about 16 in England. I went to a used record store, and there was LPs then, and I bought 2 jazz albums, which were both by English artists, by the way. Dudley Moore was one of them. Oh. Dudley Moore, who's a fantastic jazz pianist. And I thought this music was so amazing that I never really heard music like that. I grew up listening to rock and roll. For 10 years previously, I'd just been listening to rock and pop and the Beatles. So there was a mystery there in the jazz music that it kind of eluded me. And then one day, a few years later, I heard an album by George Benson called Breezin'. And it all kind of clicked for me. I think he's playing the guitar kind of like a piano. He's not using effects, he's not using distortion, he's not using a wah-wah, he's not using any of these things that I associated with electric guitar. He's just playing pure melody, and that really influenced me a lot. And
how has that experience and your introduction to jazz music influenced you?
It made me realize that you don't need vocals necessarily. If you have melody, it's pretty much the answer to everything. If you have a good melody, and if you can marry that with a good, strong beat, which jazz music up till that point, to me, hadn't really. The beat was this very ethereal, it's all. And I was used to hearing the thump of the kick drum.
Oh, okay.
In fact,
there's not a strong.
People say, what's the difference between smooth jazz and traditional jazz? Well, you can hear the kick drum.
Okay.
In smooth jazz, in fact, it's a big part of it because it's taken from pop. Really, smooth jazz is taken from pop, and funk, and traditional jazz is really a whole different thing. It's not really. It's its own art form. Jazz is what they call it, American classical music.
Yeah. And smooth jazz is your wheelhouse, so to speak.
Well, they call it smooth jazz. I don't particularly relate to that moniker, but then again, I don't relate to any moniker.
That is true.
Because we're musicians, we play the music. We don't describe the music. Right. We've spent many, countless hours sitting in dark rooms, windowless rooms, trying to learn to play our instrument, not trying to learn how to describe it.
Right, just play it.
So
who are your mentors, your jazz mentors?
Well, probably George Benson, Joe Pass, who, brilliant. I met him once. He played a little club in Los Angeles called the Vine Street Bar and Grill. And I went down there to see him, and I just sat there, and he's there, and I'm here, like
Oh,
this
that's
distance.
a treat, isn't it?
And I said to him, I got to meet him, and I asked him one question. Well, it was more of a statement, and it was just kind of a stupid thing to say, because growing up playing rock and roll, you play in the keys of the guitar that makes it easy, like A.
Yeah.
These are open strings. D, G. These are easy chords because this is the open strings of the guitar that you use to make chords. And he was playing an A flat, E flat. I mean, why would a guitar player choose to play an A flat? You can't use any open strings. And it was just kind of mystifying to me. And I even asked him this. This is my question. I said, Joe, Mr. Pass, whatever I call him, you're not really afraid of those flat keys, are you? And he looked at me like, they're all the same.
Oh.
And I wish I could have fallen through the floorboards. But
did you incorporate that in your music then? Understanding that it's all the
well,
same?
I do. Actually, one of my biggest songs is a song called Bueno Funk, and it's in B flat.
There you go. So you own
B
that.
flat minor. And that, I owe Joe, and what a genius. And that was a humiliating moment for me, but humbling. Let's say humbling moment for me. I realized, you know what? There's a whole world of music out here that I'm not cognizant of. I've got to do some education here because I've grown up playing rock and roll, and we just go the open strings, and there's Joe going and playing all these delicate things. I think, man, there's a lot about the guitar that I don't know, and I'm never would be at Joe's level, and I don't really consider myself a jazz player, but in the way that he used any key was the same to him. That's what he said to me, and I realized, I mustn't be afraid.
Well, in those humbling moments, and all through life, that's when we learn the most. So you've pictured or captured very well how people have impacted you, mentors have impacted you. What do you think, or what would you like your jazz legacy, your music legacy to be? It's a tough question because you're living it now, but what's your legacy?
It's really not a tough question.
What is it?
And it's funny that the questions you think are tough, I find easy. The questions that you find easy, I find tough.
Isn't that?
like what does jazz mean to me? That's a tough question. My legacy is, well, I was on a cruise ship recently playing my music, and a lot of people came up to me and said, just keep doing what you're doing. Your music means a lot to us. We listen to your music every Saturday. That's what we listen, Peter White music. This is the soundtrack to our lives. And I'm going, wow. I've impacted these people. I've made a difference in their lives. That's all I want. I don't care that somebody said he was the greatest musician. There's many greater musicians than me. But if I've created music that stays and stands the test of time and affects people's lives and make people happy.
Yeah.
And become the soundtrack to their lives. Oh, we took a long car trip and we listened to your music the whole time. Wow.
It's interesting because we started the interview or this story that way, how that your Christmas concert becomes a personal tradition in people's lives.
Yeah.
And finally, Peter, the Boscov's Berks Jazz Fest. A favorite moment. Doesn't have to be the ultimate one, but what's a favorite moment when you're talking about, you say, I remember at that festival we...
There are a lot of favorite moments.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Meeting Keiko Matsui for the first time at Berks, and this goes back 25 years, I think. And I was, it's Keiko Matsui. I mean, now she's become a friend, and we've played music together, and I'm not so gaga. But
you were
that
starstruck?
time, well, yes.
Bit, yeah?
Well, yes, I was. Yeah. Mindy Aber I met also, but it was the other end because she was actually backing up John Tesh at the Scottish Rite, and she says, "Hi, I'm Mindy Aber, and I've got some songs I'd like you to listen to," and on a CD, and I didn't know who she was. And years later, we started the Christmas tour together.
Yeah, you did.
And another one, I'm playing my show, and I see Boney James at the side of the stage, and I said, "Come out!" And Boney came out and played 3 or 4 songs with me, and that was a thrill because I'm a huge Boney James fan. Another time I'm playing, and at the side of the stage, I see the whole of Spyro Gyra.
All of them.
Yes, looking at me like, I said, "Wow,
that's a pretty big moment."
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, it really throws us all together, and it's a great leveler. It doesn't matter if you're a big star, you're just up and coming. you can get to rub shoulders with all these people and possibly get to play with them on stage, because we all play on the same stages. You know?
That is a perfect snapshot of what Boscov's Berks Jazz Fest is, and it's the same for the audience. You get to be up close and personal. We are looking forward to it. Thank you so much for your time today, Peter. I appreciate it, and we look forward to the show.
You're most welcome. Thank you for having me today.